Hi everyone, Peter Bhatia, editor of the Free Press here. This is the real spin room where you're going to find out what happened at the first of two presidential debates here in Detroit. We're coming to you from the Free Press newsroom, and pleased to be here with my friends and colleagues, Kim Trent, regular contributor to our editorial page from Wayne State, Brian Dickerson, our ever erudite editorial page editor, try saying that fast, and Nancy Caffer, our editorial page columnist. So we're going to roll through some questions and comments on the debate tonight, and we're going to do this pretty quickly, so enjoy, and we'll dive right into it. So, one sentence, headline from tonight's debate.
I think it's just that moderates really took aim at the big ideas of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and really kind of challenged them on. I think they made a lot of. They gained a lot of ground in the first debate, but I think clearly they kind of made themselves targets in this debate.
The dilemma for Democrats is that if you took a vote of the people on stage, the moderates would have won handily. But the two frontrunners are both the most progressive people in the race, and it isn't clear how that's going to be resolved quickly, short of an election.
My headline for tonight is that 2.5 hours is too long for a debate. It all starts to run in. I mean, it's my job to watch this stuff and to care about it, and I find it pretty numbing after about an hour and a half, so I can imagine that a regular person who isn't literally being paid to watch it is pretty checked out.
Amen to that, sister.
Yeah, no kidding. So, which candidate, or who did the most to help him or herself with Michigan voters, and how? Brian, why don't you go first?
I think Congressman Delaney, who, if he were successful, would be the first person from the House to move to the presidency in more than a century. Nevertheless, I think people know who he is after tonight, and I think he said a lot of things that resonate with Michigan voters, and particularly the kind of Michigan voters that flipped Republican districts in Metro Detroit. So I think he scored some points with Michiganders.
Nancy?
To win Michigan, the Democratic nominee really needs to turn out Detroit. It's a key Democratic constituency, majority African American, majority Democratic. A couple of the candidates, Beto O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg, I think Elizabeth Warren, were really engaging on a question about racial equity, poverty, racial injustice, and I think that having African American voters feel like the candidate really cares about those issues is going to be key to turning out Detroit.
I think that's true too, Nancy, but I do think that Tim Ryan, who otherwise has not really been a kind of blazing star in these debates, I think did kind of distinguish himself as someone who kind of understands the issues of manufacturing, and really at least tried to carve out kind of a opinion about how to think about kind of progressive ideas like building a green economy, while also talking about, he talked about having this manufacturing person who would kind of guide his, and those are the things that you have to say in a state like Michigan, how much it'll connect with kind of the union, kind of the frontline union voter that they're trying to attract, kind of remains to be seen, but I think that he probably did the best job of articulating those ideas.
I thought one of the interesting things about the debate was Detroit was kind of a sidebar. Somebody tweeted early on in the debate that the star of the show was the Fox Theater, which is Detroiters, we all know what a magnificent palace that is, but they sort of, the conversation about Michigan, such as it was kind of a throwaway. I agree. So who was the most improved compared to round one in Miami? Nancy?
I thought Delaney really stood out this time. First of all, he got to talk, which was big for him. And second of all, I think he articulated a lot of the misgivings that many people, even people who believe that healthcare is a human right, have about Medicare for all, how it's going to get implemented, how we would or could make private insurance illegal. I think these are questions that, again, a lot of people who believe that we should have universal health care have these concerns, and he really kind of got on that and stayed on that. So
Well, I think that my personal views are probably more aligned with Senator Sanders and Senator Warren, but I agree with you that I think Delaney did the best job of kind of framing what someone who would be an opponent of those ideas would really, I think he did a great job of framing that point of view in a way that's important. I think when you talk about a primary debate, what you want to do is kind of have sharpening of candidates' issues so that when they go to the general election, they have a really good way to articulate in a broad way. And I think that him pushing Warren and Sanders on those ideas, which, again, I think I'm more aligned with Warren and Sanders, but I thought that the way that he raised questions was really effective.
And I thought most improved maybe was Governor Bullock, who came out of complete obscurity to me. He's been one of the people lurking in the below 1% range that risks not being part of the show next time Democrats debate in September, and I think he's likely to be in that mix now.
Continuing to move through our questions, best or worst response of the evening? Brian, I think you get this one first.
I thought it was something that happened early in the evening when Mayor Buttigieg pointed out that wherever Democrats end up on these issues, on health care, on immigration, they're going to be portrayed as socialists. And so he said, let's stop worrying about how Republicans are going to frame this. We know how they're going to frame it. Let's have serious policy discussions and come to the best ideas.
Nancy?
I thought when Senator Sanders, who was questioned on a part of the Medicare for All bill, and sort of someone disagreed with him about it, and he said, "I wrote the damn bill." I thought it's probably the best one line to come out of the debate.
Grouchy Bernie is always a winner.
But it's a bill that hasn't passed, which I think was the
Sure.
questioner's point.
Right. I thought that Senator Warren, when she was talking about kind of the theme of the night, which was your ideas are not realistic. When she said, if you're running for president, the only thing you have to say is why we can't do something. Why would you even bother to run for president? I thought that was a really powerful way to talk about reclaiming this idea that we should be about the business of big ideas, that it shouldn't just be about, we got to be realistic, we've got to stay within this box that we know can work against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump surely didn't stay within a kind of, prescribed box of what a presidential candidate, we don't want to follow the Donald Trump prescription for being a presidential candidate, but I do think we should, I do think that she did a really good job of saying, don't be afraid of big ideas. I thought that was really good.
Great. So, weirdest moment of the evening? There were a few. Nancy?
Weirdest moment of the evening. Every time Marianne Williamson talks, I feel like I'm listening to Bernadette Peters. It's not a deep political insight, but it really messes with me. So
I'm going to YouTube when I get home to find the whole movie.
I like the moment in which Governor Bullock made fun of Bernie Sanders flailing with his arms, and Bernie Sanders did a little parody of Bernie Sanders flailing with his arms. I thought that was an odd parody.
Well, I think that, okay, I was just trying to pretend that remind you of what I thought was the weirdest moment, which was the disconnect between the audio track and the candidates for the last, probably like 2/3 of the debate. It seemed like a really long time. That you kind of think that would get fixed at some point, and it never did, and I thought that was pretty odd.
Yeah. Okay, now some perhaps tougher questions. So it's late Tuesday night as we're talking. Who should drop out tomorrow morning?
What?
I think John Hickenlooper should run for the Senate, and probably Beto O'Rourke should too. So I think they should probably call it quits and go do those things.
I have to say, I don't think that Bernie Sanders is connecting in the way that he did 4 years ago. I think that then obviously he had a much narrower field. I think Elizabeth Warren kind of has the wind at her back on the same issues, and I don't know that he's bringing much to the table that isn't already there in a package that might be less grating for those who have memories from 2016. I'll just let you guess.
Tim Ryan, who is the biggest man on the stage physically, I think was once again one of the smallest people on the stage metaphorically. And, I don't see him as difference maker in this campaign. I think it's time for him to find one of the other 9 who he can support.
Okay, so then of the 10 people on the stage, which 5 should go through to the next round? So flipping the question around.
Okay, do we have a consensus that just on the basis of their public support, Warren and Sanders and Buttigieg are still in the mix?
Well, Warren.
I agree with Kim. I think Sanders is I don't think he's connecting either. And yeah, he probably will go on to the next round and probably does deserve to because of his public support and his fundraising success. But I don't know that he's adding anything to the conversation at this point. So I'm going to just poke holes in your premise right now that we have consensus on Sanders.
Well, I do think we eventually get down to a race that doesn't have Sanders and Warren in it.
Right.
I think one of them will emerge.
Correct.
One of them will emerge as the spokesman for that wing of the party. Yeah.
I agree.
But who else?
Yeah, who else should go first?
So Warren, I feel like Buttigieg has a lot of ideas people are interested in. I think the way that he talks about religious values, which is something that Democrats have not done really for a long time, tying Christian values specifically to progressive policy imperatives. I think that's always interesting when he goes in that direction. I think he's thoughtful. I think he provides good fodder in the debates. And I think Delaney should continue on in the debates because I thought he was a really good foil for Sanders and Warren this time. I thought it led to some substantive exchanges.
I want to put in a good word for Amy Klobuchar, and I want to acknowledge before I do that, she's had a really lackluster couple of debates. I don't think this is her format. I think that her experience and her record have earned her a chance to go on. I think she is bound to connect eventually with the Michigan voters who flipped the 8th and 11th congressional districts here. She reminds me a lot of Debbie Stabenow, who is popular with those voters. And I think it's very useful for the party if she stays in the mix.
I don't know that I necessarily would vote for Bullock, but I think that I would like to hear more from someone who's won kind of a red state the way that he did, and who self-identifies as a progressive, just to see, what he might be able to bring to the table. And I think tonight was probably the first time that he kind of broke through, so that you paid attention to him. And it's the first time he was in the debate, but I don't think that he really has connected that much. So I'd like to hear more from him. I don't know if he necessarily makes my final pick, but I think that he, certainly can go on to the next round.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about each of those. So what does Mayor Pete need to do to survive? It was kind of a delightful contrast, and it wasn't, it was quasi-random, but I think they were ranked based on audience support or polling support. But to have the 37-year-old next to the 77-year-old and I think Jake Tapper asked the question about age, which Mayor Pete handled fairly elegantly, and then Bertie rebutted elegantly. But what does he need to do to get more traction? Because his polling numbers are okay, but he's at you could say the top of the bottom tier or the bottom of the top tier.
To really be a viable candidate for the presidency, he needs to have done something other than be the mayor of South Bend. But I think if he just keeps showing up and handing in reasonable performances, I think he'll probably stick around until the primaries start.
And Brian, you spoke out for the senator from Minnesota. The format's not good for her. So what does she need to do to in the next go round?
She needs to get on a smaller stage where she can answer questions for more than 60 seconds and get out of trying to find a soundbite. I was a little irritated with the commentators tonight because I thought they interrupted. I thought the candidates unusually responded to the questions tonight. And I think they were often interrupted when they came to their end of the 60 seconds when they were still saying something interesting that was directly answering the question. And I'd like to hear some of those conversations go on a beat longer.
Kim, do you think that, do you buy into the Bernie versus Elizabeth fighting for the extreme left, if you will, and it's gonna, I mean, how do they separate from each other? Because they sort of violently agree on most issues, right?
So I think that the difference between them is going to be electability, because that seems to be the issue that's motivating most Democrats this time. So
Yeah.
I think that since they are so similar in their kind of points of view, they're going to have to make the case that, okay, but I can attract more voters, even though, you know, and I don't, because they don't seem to be really trying to go at each other because they are so similar. So that's, I think, going to be the dividing line between those two.
I think there's another big difference between them, which is that Bernie's whole thing is, if you elect me, it'll be because there's a big political revolution, and then we'll take the whole government and be able to do the stuff I want to do. Whereas Warren has a lot of detailed plans for how she's going to get stuff done. That being said, I don't think that having detailed plans necessarily resonates with voters. I don't know that that's what people are looking for. Some voters, sure, and it does to some degree, but there's a whole lot of other factors. So, but I think that is a big distinction between them, is his sort of, we'll just make this happen through the revolution, and her more.
But I mean, I think you saw that in 2016 with, you know, Clinton v. Trump. Trump had zero plans and zero plans to make plans, and Hillary had 15 lists, and it didn't connect with. So I think the question is, because I mean, by the way, that's why I like Elizabeth Warren a lot, is because of the detailed plans.
We're nerds.
How do we? I don't know if that's going. I don't know if that helps or hurts, because a lot of times when I see Bernie Sanders, I don't see a huge difference in style of these. I mean, they certainly have completely different platforms, but in style, I think Sanders and Trump actually have a lot in common in that respect. I have the political will, I have the political movement at my back that's going to just create this transformational change, because, you know, I deign it to be something. And I think that that's something that kind of scares me about it.
I agree. I think, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, but plans is not, like, how practicality is not a thing that people necessarily look for at the polls.
So Brian, Bullock and Delaney have sort of staked out the moderate position. Bullock's prevailing point was he's from a red state, and of course I'm a Northwesterner by birth, so I know a fair amount about him. And he is like in the tradition of like John Tester, the senator from Montana. They like to stress they wear boots a lot, and you know they like horses and so on, which is very Montana. And Delaney is sort of being the don't believe the snake oil other people are selling, but they're staking out a less left position. Can that sail going forward?
I don't know if that's the nominee. I think they're speaking for an important part of the independent electorate, especially. Help me remember whether it was Delaney or Bullock who said early in the debate, a lot of our constituents don't have time for a revolution. And I remember thinking there are people in Michigan who are hearing that. One thing that strikes me is that nobody on that stage is as uncomfortable with anybody else on that stage as everybody on the Republican stage was uncomfortable with Donald Trump. So that kind of acrimony and bitterness is missing so far in these early rounds.
I think Warren said at one point that any of the 20 candidates would be a better president, and that's certainly a popular position among the Dems.
These are all conventional candidates who play by the rules that we understand politics to have. Like, you don't randomly insult someone's private parts on a debate stage.
Who might be your vice president.
Or whatever. I mean, these are people who they may attack your policies, or they may say that your policies are foolish, or that you're impractical, or that you're selling snake oil, but they're not going to suddenly slam your personal appearance or your marriage or whatever. We're kind of back in normal world for now, but one of those people has to go on and debate Trump, so yikes.
All right, one final question. So 10 down, 10 to go. What is your, who's the breakout star tomorrow night? Is Biden going to come back? Is Kamala going to level him again? Who's the Castro breakout star tomorrow night? And we haven't talked about Williamson, and if you want to get in a word on her, please do. But looking forward to tomorrow night, what do you think?
Can I throw in a brief caution about supporting charismatic celebrities who aren't qualified to be president? Because it didn't go so well. I think Kamala Harris has the highest bar and the highest pressure for tomorrow night. I mean, she was the breakout star of the last one. No one saw that coming. She came out of nowhere with that busing exchange that dominated the debate. So can she replicate that? Will it seem forced if she does? I mean, I think she has the most potential to be the breakout star. But but does lightning strike twice?
I think tomorrow is make or break night for Biden. There's a lot of energy. There was a lot of energy on that stage tonight. There'll be a lot of energy tomorrow, and he has been a little bit doddery. He's about the same age as Robert Mueller, another guy who disappointed a lot of people by how old he was, and I think Joe Biden has to dispel that ghost pretty quickly tomorrow.
I agree that I think Kamala Harris has the most to lose tomorrow because she definitely has kind of the momentum. Her performance in the first debate was stellar, and Biden, this is his chance to show. I mean, I think that he's relied a lot on the goodwill that people feel for pre-2016 or pre-2017 when Trump took office, and kind of at least kind of dignity that people think about when they think about the Obama administration, but that's only going to take him so far. So I hope that, I know that there was a lot of discussion the last time about him not taking his advisor's advice to really bone up and prepare for the debate. I think that he's smart enough to have done it this time, but we'll really see tomorrow.
All right. So that's it for tonight from the Free Press Newsroom. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Nancy, Brian, Kim. And on to day 2 of the Detroit debates. Good night, everyone.